Hey everyone, I'm Megyn Kelly. Welcome to the Megyn Kelly Show. Oh, we have a lot to get to today. We have a lot to get to. Did you see the report coming out of John Ralston in Nevada? Like, he's the guy on Nevada, and it is not good news for Kamala Harris. Is her campaign falling apart? I mean, is this like I'm from Albany, New York. We go up to Saratoga every August. We watch the horses run. You always want your horse to be kind of in third, right about 1/3 of the way to go. Like when there's 1/3 left, you don't want your horse in first, you don't want your horse in second. And then that third horse usually pulls ahead and wins. And it kind of feels like that's what's happening right now. I could be totally wrong. Don't hold me to it. Anything could still happen on election day. But it feels like Trump is that third horse and he's pulling forward. He's moved into the first position. And Trump's never been ever in the first position in these presidential races, ever. They're always showing him behind 7 points, 6 points. Certainly at this time in the race, he was getting crushed by Hillary. We know how that turned out. And by Biden. Yes, he lost to Biden, but by about 40,000 votes in the swing states. I mean, it was tight, way tighter than the polls showed. So what's happening? Trump's ahead. He's ahead in all states. If you look at the Real Clear Politics average, I don't even want to say it out loud. Like, there's 2 weeks to go, literally 2 weeks from today. And Nevada is supposed to be her worst state, but not according to the early voting. Early voting, Trump's, can't say he's winning, but the Republican vote is higher than the Dem in Nevada. Nevada, that's her best state of the swings. Okay, we're going to get to all that. We've got all this coverage for you today, but I want to start with something else. If this report had appeared as it should have on the front of the New York Times about Donald Trump, it would be everywhere. But instead, it was published in the Washington Free Beacon, which has been doing amazing work this entire election cycle. These guys are unafraid to go where no one else will go, and really solid reporting. I mean, they've got staff, they dig deep. This is Eliana's publication. And they've got one out today, and it's a doozy about Vice President Kamala Harris and Bombshell new reporting about her past plagiarism. Now, when we had Tucker on, we talked to you briefly about the Chris Rufo report that outlined how she had plagiarized large sections of her book. That got zero pickup by the mainstream other than to dismiss it. The New York Times brought in some expert to say, it's really not serious. And they had only given that expert small portions of Chris Rufo's evidence. And when the guy saw the full evidence, he's like, this is more serious than I thought. Geez, I hadn't seen this when I commented to the Times. And then it was lost into the ether. Well, in comes the Free Beacon with a brand new host of examples of Kamala Harris outright stealing other people's work. This time, they include her service as a California Attorney General, where she lifted, according to the Free Beacon, a fictionalized story about a sex trafficking victim and then presented it as a real case to paint her office in a good light. It was a fabrication. She changed it, suggested it was real and her own to make her office look good. The incredible investigation comes from Aaron Subramaniam. He's been great at the Beacon, and it includes several different examples that they have uncovered. We're going to walk you through them. The first example is from 2007. She was then DA in San Francisco. She testified before Congress about a bill that would have created a student loan repayment program for state and local prosecutors as an incentive to keep them from leaving public service for high-paying law firms. However, virtually her entire written testimony was lifted from another district attorney in Illinois, half the country away, a man named Paul Logley, who happens to be a Republican. Look at these full screens. It's not important to be able to read them, meaning these are graphics. It's not important to be able to read them because they're in tiny print here, though you can if you go to the Free Beacon. What's important is that you see the highlighted red sections showing it's the same speech. On the left is the testimony from Paul Logley, and on the right is the testimony from Kamala Harris. As the testimony goes on, you can see the majority of it is highlighted in red, meaning it's the same. Per the Free Beacon, the submitted written statements even contain the same typos, such as missing punctuation or mistaken plurals. One error, a who, that should have been a whom, was corrected in Kamala Harris's version, which the Beacon points out is more damning for her. She went through and tried to clean it up, knowing it wasn't hers, trying to make it sound a little better, but didn't change any of the substance. According to the Beacon, 80% of Harris's speech was stolen, they say copied verbatim, from Logley. Okay, now to a different allegation. This one is about sex trafficking. This happened in 2012 when Kamala Harris had ascended to the Attorney General spot in the state of California. She released a report titled The State of Human Trafficking in California, 2012. The report touted how many trafficking investigations her office had launched and how many arrests they had made. Per the Beacon, one section of the report included stories about victims of sex trafficking. It told the story of a woman named Kelly from San Francisco. According to the report, Kelly, quote, had lived in a motel where her pimp forced her to engage in prostitution, end quote. But Kelly was able to contact a hotline and local law enforcement helped rescue her from her pimp. The story concluded stating, quote, Kelly is currently receiving services and helping law enforcement to pursue a case against her pimp, end quote. The problem here is Kelly doesn't exist. And this case did not happen. At least it didn't happen in San Francisco. It's an invention. The Beacon uncovered Kelly's story was actually from a Polaris project. Polaris is a nonprofit that runs a national human trafficking hotline. 5 months earlier, Polaris had posted a series of stories that it said were, quote, representative of the types of calls they receive. So here again is the side-by-side. On the left, you can see Kelly's story from Polaris. Again, just a representative of the types of calls Polaris gets. In the Polaris write-up, Kelly lives in Washington, D.C. And on the other side, all in red, so you can see the similarities, Harris's retelling of Kelly's story as real, only now it's happening in San Francisco, for which Kamala Harris has responsibility. This is unbelievable. She's too lazy to even figure out whether she has a real victim she can talk about when she's stealing somebody else's crime stories. Sex trafficking victims obviously exist. It's actually not hard at all to find them. They do call hotlines to get help. But Harris's office is trying to show that Kelly, as a victim in San Francisco, that she reached out to the local authorities there to get safety. And last week, Chris Rufo reported that Harris had plagiarized portions of her 2009 book, Smart on Crime, too. Right? So Harris uses this story, which is invented without realizing that, to make herself look good. And she did the same in her book, Smart on Crime. This is the Rufo reporting. As I mentioned, the New York Times yawned at it, writing in their headline, conservative activist seizes on passages from Harris's book. Seizes. It's a pounce. They pounced. But as more examples pile up, will legacy media have to start paying attention? This has ruined presidential campaigns before, including that of the now sitting president when he was first running for president, back when everyone listening was a toddler. In 1987, then Senator Joe Biden's campaign for president ended after examples of his plagiarism and lies were uncovered. Oh, we were so cute then, weren't we? We were quaint. We cared about lying. He was accused of lifting phrases from a British lawmaker and also from Robert F. Kennedy, Sr. He was also accused of outright lying to voters about his law school career. And back then, the legacy media did not let him get away with it. Look at this report from evening newscasts back when that story happened.
Senator Joseph Biden may have more explaining to do.
The new questions stem from taped remarks of Biden during an April campaign appearance in New Hampshire.
I went to law school on a full academic scholarship, the only one in my class to have a full academic scholarship. Went back to law school and, in fact, ended up in the top half of my class. I was the outstanding student in the political science department at the end of my year. I graduated with 3 degrees from undergraduate school and 165 credits, only needed 123 credits.
Biden now concedes he did not graduate in the top half of his law school class, that he does not have 3 degrees from college, and that he was not named outstanding political science student in college.
Newsweek says Biden actually went to school on a half scholarship, ended up near the bottom of his class, and won only 1 degree, not 3.
mean, think of the balls in doing that. By the way, credit to Newsbusters for finding that old clip. Who does that? This reminds me of that cult leader, Keith Raniere, the guy who's now in prison for the rest of his life because he started a cult, again, back in my hometown in Albany, with a bunch of women who he convinced to be sex slaves. And he made people call him prefect. And he said stuff like this about himself. He said he graduated with like a 4.0 and he had a triple major, and none of that was true. He had crappy grades. He didn't have a triple major. Like, that's who's the sitting president right now. A pathological liar about his own biography. And you know what? He chose well for his number two, because Kamala Harris appears to have the exact same problem. But does it become an issue for her in the way that that one did for Joe Biden? And we've seen other plagiarism scandals tank careers. Does it exist as a scandal at all if the corporate media doesn't touch it? Look at the Doug Emhoff story, allegedly abusing the girlfriend he was with prior to Kamala Harris. Where's that? No one's covered it. No one. We covered it. Chris Cuomo spent a minute on it. That's it. No one is talking about it. They've done a complete blackout of that story. Why? It was well sourced. It had 3 supporting witnesses. It had paper receipts. No, they're not interested because it has the potential to hurt her. So what happens with this one? Joining me now, Hogan Gidley, former National Press Secretary and Vice Chair of the Center for Election Integrity, should say former Trump National Press Secretary. He was out on the trail yesterday with Mr. Trump, and Doug Schoen, Democratic consultant, pollster, and strategist, and author of The Politics of Life, My Road to the Middle of a Hostile and Adversarial World, who has his own new polls out this week. Don't miss a moment. Subscribe to this show on YouTube and follow me on Insta, Facebook, and X. The October 15th deadline has come and gone with the tax man. Are you prepared for what's next? Do you owe back taxes? Are your tax returns still unfiled? Missed the deadline to file for an extension? Now that October 15th is officially behind us, the IRS may be ramping up enforcement and could be contacting you soon. You could face wage garnishments, frozen bank accounts, or even property seizures if you have not taken action yet. But there's hope. Tax Network USA has helped taxpayers save over $1 billion in tax debt and has filed over 10,000 tax returns. They specialize in helping people reduce their tax burdens. So visit tnusa.com/Megyn or call 1-800-958-1000 for a free consultation. Their experts will walk you through a few simple questions to see how much you could save. Give it a try now before the IRS takes more aggressive steps. Take control and visit tnusa.com/Megyn or call 1-800-958-1000. Guys, welcome back to the show. Great to have you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So let me start with you on it, Hogan. Does this catch fire? Does it have legs?
I don't think it has legs because, look, the media really participates in bias in 2 ways: what they decide to cover and how they cover it. They're obviously ignoring this because it hurts their chosen candidate. It should be pointed out, though, Kamala Harris says consistently that she wouldn't do anything differently than Joe Biden. I guess that includes the plagiarism that Joe Biden committed back in the 80s as well. She's so tied to this man at this point in time. Yeah, I mean, they're exactly the same. Now, just for a moment, I'm sure if you asked the family members of the 13 people who died in Benghazi whether they wished Kamala Harris would do something different, I'm sure they wished she would. I'm sure if you asked those who are victims of rape, murder, homicide, burglary, assault by illegal aliens, I bet they want Kamala to do something different. I'm sure the people out there paying more for gas and groceries would want Kamala Harris to do something different. But in this particular instance, it goes to a bigger problem with Kamala Harris, and that is she is contrived, she is manufactured, she is a made-up caricature of a candidate that we all knew, if given enough time, would be exposed. The concern was here that because this campaign was shortened, remember, she called Joe Biden a rapist and a racist from a debate stage and had T-shirts made and never even got to the first vote in the Democrat primary. In this particular instance, the concern, though, was once she was given the moniker of being the standard bearer of the Democrat Party, not getting any votes, of course, just gifted to her, We were concerned on the right that the condensed time frame of this would not allow these type of stories to come out and eventually permeate into all the minds of Americans and cause them to pause and wonder, is she real? This is never really probably going to be a big story for the mainstream media, but folks out there who are paying attention, this is just kind of an underscoring, an underlining of the concern they just inherently have with Kamala Harris, that she is fake and that she is phony.
What do you think, Doug?
Well, I agree with Hogan that this is not going to become an issue. And I don't think it's going to become an issue because we got 2 weeks to go. The facts, while seemingly pretty clear, are somewhat complicated. And I don't see a presidential election, particularly with a sympathetic mainstream media to Kamala Harris, doing what you are now doing, Megyn, which is giving attention to issues that raise questions about her character, her veracity, her integrity, and yes, let's say it, even her commitment to democracy.
Yeah, I mean, just her honesty. To your point, Hogan, we've been taking a look at her past. I mean, one of the things I really would love to see is how many cases did she try? You know, what is her actual record as a prosecutor? It's very hard to find. It really is. Like, you've got to go to the court clerks. You need paper records. The DA's office, the San Francisco DA's office, and court clerks are not going to be very forthcoming, let's say, about her. They're not in a mood to help people like me or others on the conservative side, you know, digging for information on her. And yet we know just from the research that we have done, Kamala Harris, this is via Politico, and according to citing an Intercept analysis, that Kamala Harris originally ran for office. It must have been, I'm trying to think, it must have been either her AG campaign. No, but her AG campaign, because it was 2003. Well, she said that she had. DA. Okay, well, she said that at that point that she had tried hundreds of serious and violent felonies, including homicide, rape, and child sexual assault cases. Hundreds of them, hundreds. And then what happened was her opponent, the veteran criminal defense attorney Bill Fazio, said you lied. You did not handle hundreds. At best, you handled tens. And she was forced to admit, okay, I've tried about 50 cases. Now, that's a big difference. You've tried hundreds versus you've tried 50. And I've never heard her talk about it. You know, Hogan, I like real trial lawyers, and I know a ton of them, criminal and civil alike. They've got so many war stories. It's very easy for them to recall back. This is what I learned in that one. She does the little John Wayne routine, like I've tried the criminal trends, national drug gangs, but she doesn't actually tell you about the stories, about the cases. Something smells there. I'm just saying.
And the one she does pull is kind of a fake one. The one she kind of points to in the script you just point out on the front end. But a curious media could have easily gotten to the bottom of these claims by Kamala Harris. This is a pattern. It goes to a larger narrative that is developing about Kamala Harris. Remember that story she tells when she was like in a stroller at a civil rights march and someone asks, "What do you want, dear?" And she says, "Freedom." And everyone laughs, which is a story lifted, I think, from MLK Jr., if I'm not mistaken. But still, it's these types of things that continue to trickle out that damage her. But the American people are already concerned and nervous about who she is as a candidate, as an office holder, and as a person. Because remember, it was a year ago that the mainstream media was actually writing stories that said, Joe Biden has a Kamala Harris problem. Kamala Harris is the most unpopular vice president in history. They knew all of these things were problems for her, and they can try to make fetch happen all they want to. It's very difficult to sell a bad product. And when you have someone like Kamala Harris that continues to get caught in lie after lie, all it does for those who are skeptical is go, yeah, I knew there was something that wasn't right there. Now I have some more information. I realize she's not right for the country either.
Here's the other thing. So Kamala Harris, you know, she wants to tell us that she's from Oakland. She was born in Oakland. She was raised in Montreal. She was
Right.
raised in Canada. She wasn't even raised in America. And she wants us to believe she had this very humble middle-class background. Both of her parents were PhDs. Her mother was this storied scientist from India who came over, and her father was the first black tenured economics professor at Stanford. I mean, this is not exactly the, working to middle-class roots that she'd like us to believe. There are questions about whether she ever worked at McDonald's. And then on top of all this, we learned this week, Doug, that she started off, she transferred into Howard from her college in Canada. And then she went to University of California, Hastings College of Law in San Francisco. We just found out that she used this, it's called the Legal Education Opportunity Program. And she was part of it. And I believe that means to get in. We had this at my law school too. A lot of law schools have this, where you're trying to increase your diversity. And by that, I mean people of color. They don't care about working class diversity, et cetera, although they'll say they do. But you're trying to get more minority students in, and they lower the academic standards generally. And then they let those people start the summer before law school starts to give them a head start, to help them out, to give them a little prep on what to expect. And to be honest, if it's anything like my law school, a lot of these people fail out the first year because they shouldn't have been at this law school. They should have been at another law school that, if any, that matches up better with their skill set. But she took advantage of this. And she would have had to document her disadvantaged educational, economic, social, or physical background, including a personal essay detailing the adversity she had encountered. So I don't know what she did to get in, but she used this. She used this, obviously, to get into law school. She failed her bar exam. This is not an impressive record for someone who wants to be president, Doug. This has got Harriet Miers vibes to me. The woman who was such a disaster, George W. Bush had to withdraw her name as a Supreme Court nominee.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything, Megyn, about her record that is particularly impressive. And I think more generally, what I see in the polls is that voters are beginning to understand that there's really no there with Kamala Harris, whether it be her record as a law student, as a lawyer, as a prosecutor, as an attorney general. There doesn't appear to be any overarching argument she can make other than I'm the same as Joe Biden, and whatever positions I've taken that are unpopular, I'm only too happy to alter to fit the political climate. So what I see, Megyn, is a problem that goes beyond integrity to inauthenticity, which I think, as Election Day approaches, is actually the larger issue that she faces, because voters are seeing that there's no record, there's no agenda for the future, and there's no sense of character about her that gives people real confidence.
Yes. I mean, all of this background dovetails perfectly with what we've been seeing from her. On this show, we pay very close attention to the remarks she makes publicly since she started speaking to see what we can glean about her, because she has remained somewhat of a mystery. And what we're learning is there is a reason for this empty talk that she gives. There doesn't appear to be more there, Hogan. And I'll tell you what, in getting ready for today, we looked at the 3 town halls she just did. And what we saw was the exact lines that she's been using on the campaign trail thus far, repeated over and over. And sometimes in the same event, she would forget that she'd already given that exact answer in response to an earlier question, and she would just repeat it. I mean, it's almost like to the point where you're wondering if there's a Stepford thing going on, like the machine has malfunctioned. Someone's got to Control-Alt-Delete in there it's got to reboot. It doesn't realize it's already done all this. There's truly there's nothing to connect to. And all of this explains it, because she doesn't have a lifetime of accomplishment. She has a lifetime of being dishonest about her alleged accomplishments, all the way through to congressional testimony, to her book. Now she ascends to these very powerful positions, at least on paper, and she's asked to go run for president. And she can't do it. So what we get is just repeat the line, repeat the line, repeat the line. Here's a sample. Monday, 3 events in 3 different swing states. Take a listen to Kamala Harris in SOT 4.
So I've now, as vice president, met over 150 world leaders, presidents, prime ministers, chancellors, and kings, many of them multiple times.
We've heard this.
To the point we're on a first-name basis.
1,000 times.
I met over 150 world leaders, presidents, prime ministers, chancellors, and kings. Met over 150
It's a
world
different
leaders.
event.
Presidents, prime
Different
ministers,
event.
chancellors, and kings. We have traditionally been able to walk in those rooms, chin up, shoulders back. Chin up,
Heard
shoulders
it
back.
1,000 times.
We walk in, chin up, shoulders back. I have said many times publicly, and I'll say it again, in many, many ways, Donald Trump is an unserious man. I do believe Donald Trump to be an unserious man. And I've said publicly, Donald Trump is an unserious man. The vast majority of us have so much more in common than what separates us. Have so much more in common than what separates us. That the vast majority of us have more in common than what separates us. You know, we are an ambitious people. We are aspirational. We have dreams.
Oh, God.
We are
Make it stop.
an ambitious people. We have aspirations. We have dreams.
Oh, my God. Hogan.
It's brutal. The reason it sounds empty is because it is empty, because she is empty. She offers nothing. Now, do politicians give a lot of the same speeches all of the time? Absolutely. But something Doug hit on, the word I think is so important, is inauthentic.
This isn't even a speech, Hogan. This is a Q&A. Sorry, keep going.
Yes, but these things are rehearsed on their side. Listen, there was that story that came out. She had that like dinner party planned. And so she made her staff sit down with her at a table and even pour wine so she could practice having a dinner party coming up. She could have stood at that McDonald's drive-through counter for a year practicing that and not been able to pull off what Donald Trump did. Of course, these things are staged and set up, but Donald Trump goes in there and he is a billionaire businessman and is comfortable with everybody he's around. He makes them feel like they're the only person in the room. The media is not angry at Donald Trump because that whole thing at McDonald's failed. They're angry at him because it succeeded, and it succeeded showing the difference between someone like Donald Trump and someone like Kamala. You hit on it. It is the Control-Alt-Delete. It's almost Manchurian-ish. She is prepped and pre-designed and pre-programmed to say certain things at certain times. And even though she is given the questions in advance, even though she is given the answers in advance, they're scripted, ready to go, they still don't say anything that would do a single thing to fix the problems she herself created as vice president of the United States. And she looks around like all of these things in her campaign and all of these things in the country are happening to her, but they're happening because of her and her policies and her laziness. Every time I see this.
Okay. All right. So I want to give you an example of some of what we're seeing here. So Doug, you saw that first montage we did. We're being very fair. We're not taking it out of context. We watch the whole things. We watch all 3 of the town halls. We've been watching everything she does. This audience is far more familiar with Kamala Harris's speech than they want to be. This is her answering 2 different questions in Pennsylvania and Michigan. Take a listen to SOT 5.
How do you propose to help bridge this gap, making both child and elder care more affordable for hardworking families?
You are a part of what we call the sandwich generation. I actually bring a personal experience to it as well. I took care of my mother when she was sick. And that work is the work of trying to cook something that they feel like eating.
What would you say to people like myself who are part of these traditionally conservative communities who want to move forward but are feeling the pressures of the political divide?
I actually, personal story, I took care of my mother when she was sick. It's about trying to cook something they feel like eating.
Oh my God. That second question had nothing to do with the sandwich generation or taking care of your mother. And once again, how inane is it's about cooking something they want to eat? Like, Doug, there's nothing to hold on to. As a Democrat, as a lifelong Democrat, this is the weakest Democrat politician they've ever presented us to consider for president.
Well, it's why they want and wanted as short a campaign as possible, because the less time people have and had to get to know her, the better she did. She is in what I think is a decline. It's not precipitous, Megyn, but as people see that there, as I said before, there's no substance, increasingly they're either moving to undecided, some numbers are moving to Trump, and I would say to you and to Hogan, if Trump were able to focus more on the bread and butter issues that people care about and talk about the specifics of his agenda going forward, those voters who are now getting somewhat dismayed with Kamala Harris will have a reason to vote for Trump. Trump, as of yet, has not closed the sale, which is why, despite a very narrow lead, the race is still too close to call.
Mm-hmm. There's one more I want to show you, Hogan. The word salad, which we all know. I mean, many people have compared it to the kid who hasn't read the book, who stands up and has to give the book report. But I mean, we've all had the thing where you can't remember and you just start spitting out filler words until you remember. That's almost every answer for her. The media's obsessed with trying to get us now to focus on Trump and the fact that, oh, he rambles. They don't point out all she does is ramble on with these word salads every third answer. What is that if not a ramble? She's not substantive. Here's just the latest example from Monday in Pennsylvania.
And I've counted that I have taken the oath of office 6 times. And for the elected leaders here, we know it is an oath that one must take sincerely and unequivocally, which is an oath, among other things, to support and defend the Constitution of the United States and to understand what those principles represent and what they require of the individual who holds the office in the public trust. Think of that duty, and it is a duty, by the way. There are certain things in our lives that we have the choice if we feel like it. And then there are certain things that are just fundamentally a duty, like to raise our children, things of that nature. It is a duty to take seriously that oath.
It's the same little phrases that she uses for Phil. Why is she talking about the oath of office over and over? Who cares? To Doug's point, who does that motivate to vote for her?
Yeah. She finds one word and uses like 7 derivations of that one word in 2 sentences. And that's like the entire thing. That's the shtick. Boy, this campaign's come a long way since Joy and Vibes. I was on TV recently arguing with a host, and I pointed out the fact that I'd spent $300 on groceries here in Washington, D.C., and they asked me how I wanted to pay. I pulled my hand out of my pocket. I said, "Do you take Joy?" And they looked at me funny, and I said, "Oh, this must be a place that only takes vibes." And they're like, "What? You need money, sir." And the host kind of was like, "Ah, ha, ha, ha." And I'm like, it's not ah, ha, ha for those people out there struggling to make ends meet. They're looking for solutions, and all they're getting are empty slogans and meaningless words from Kamala Harris and these ramblings. And you talked about it. The mainstream media is never going to do the right thing and cover her honestly, because it would impugn them in various ways. And of course, their desired outcome wouldn't be the case. But she's had $1 billion spent on her campaign, billions of dollars of free, good publicity from the mainstream media. The question isn't why isn't Donald Trump ahead? It's widened Kamala up by 20 points. And it's because of clips exactly like that, where the people in the room aren't fooled by her voice slowing down.
There it is.
And are taking these long pauses. No one's fooled by this act.
That's it. You guys are both saying the same thing, and it's what I'm feeling on a visceral level, that she can get out there and she can do this routine as much as she wants in front of Bret Baier, in front of Oprah, in front of Maria Shriver, but you can't fool the American people. Over time, Doug, they're getting it, that this is an empty suit. They don't know who she is or what she stands for. And I'm just going to give you one more. This was so indicative of what we're dealing with here. The question that she gets asked here is, tell me 3 things about you that people don't know about, right? Like, if I said that to you, you could easily come up with a couple of things that most people don't know about you. You know, like, hey, I have a Gibson guitar with my name and mother of pearl on the neck that John Rich gave to me with a note that reads, don't forget to practice, right? There's one off the top of my head. Whatever. I had a dog that bit 17 people. I could keep going. I'm having a track record on my dogs, as it turns out. Anyway, yeah. So I didn't shoot him in the face like Kristi Noem that did, though. I let my dog have a nice, peaceful transition to the other side. Anywho, anybody can do this, Doug. But look how she answers this question. And then Maria Shriver she turns to Liz Cheney, who's with Kamala Harris, for help. It doesn't go much better. Sat 10.
What are 3 things you can tell this audience about you that aren't in your ads, that people aren't telling people on the robocalls, that perhaps they just wouldn't know, that might give them a feeling for who you are as a woman?
I have lived a full life. I am a wife, I am a mother, I am a sister, I am a godmother, I love to cook. I started my career as a prosecutor. I have, as vice president, met over 150 world leaders. Presidents, prime ministers, chancellors, and kings.
Oh my gosh.
There is so much at stake in this election.
Liz Cheney, tell us real quick, you've been spending human time with her. Tell the audience what you see that perhaps, the camera doesn't get or that you have.
Well, I think that what I could tell you is that what the vice president is saying about wanting to be a president for all Americans, caring deeply about this country, those are things that come across very, very clearly and very directly.
There is nothing, Doug. She couldn't say one thing, not one thing.
Yeah, I'm a little speechless because I think we all can. And Megyn, if you'll forgive me on a podcast, the most endearing thing that I know about you that I'm not sure everybody knows is how you met your husband. And that is a lovely and warm story that I've heard you tell. They'll probably best for another day, but it speaks to your humanity, your concern, and ultimately the strength of your union.
Oh, you're so sweet, Doug. Thank you.
It's true, and I remember when you told me and told others. Put a big smile on my face. Kamala Harris can't do that and won't do that.
Everyone can do it. Let me just put you on the spot. Tell me one thing, Doug, that the American public might not know about you. Some interesting fact that they might not already know.
They probably would not know that, like you, I went to law school. I had a father who was committed to me being a lawyer. And when I went into business with Mark Penn some 40 years ago, he said that you're on your own. I'm not going to help you. You have a law degree. I wish you good luck, but don't ask because the answer is no. And
That's
Megyn, I tell you that was the greatest gift I could have been given.
Yeah, totally. My mom said the same thing except it was after college, before law school, and she said the financial umbilical cord is cut. Hogan, give me one fact about you off the top of your head that people wouldn't know.
I do calligraphy. I know how to do calligraphy. My dad taught me how to do that.
That's interesting. And that's a different aspect of your personality.
People.
You're artistic. You're aesthetic. Why can't she even have like a pre-rehearsed answer on something like that, Hogan?
But did you not notice she also, as you pointed out, had to go to someone in Cheney who the left called a warmonger, who lost her own race by like 25 points, whose persona non grata, who the left hates, and said, hey, could you, the object of our ire for the last like 2 decades, could you bail out Kamala Harris, please?
Could you please humanize her?
Yes, please. The one that we want to try for war crimes, and she couldn't do it. And Kamala Harris's first answer is like, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, and I'm a vice president. Well, those are things we all know. My goodness. It's just insane.
I'm a mom, I'm a sister. What are you? You've got to be kidding me. Like, everyone knows that. We saw the Democratic National Convention. I'm a wife. I'm a lawyer. she can't do it. It really does concern me that we have an empty vessel, and we are really close, not as close as she'd like, but really close to elevating her to the most powerful position in the world. I mean, I truly am starting to be like one of those people who's like, maybe it should have been Biden. I mean, I was as loud as anybody saying he can't serve a second term. But I'm really starting to think, like, I get it now. I get why those top Democrats, Doug, were covering for him. Like, I think they saw what we are all seeing, and they were like, you have no idea what you're asking for, people.
What I would say, Megyn, is, and I agreed and agree with you, he is not fit for a second term. But I can say, even though I was happy he stood down, I understood in his State of the Union and in some of his remarks what he's been trying to accomplish, whether it be in the Middle East or with Ukraine. We might agree, we might disagree, but I had a sense of where the man stood at a variety of different times. With Kamala, I have no sense of where she stands on anything in any way. It's all sound bites, talking points. And I would say, and Hogan's in this business too, and I'm curious his reaction, pretty lame talking points most of the time. You don't really have much sense that you're getting to know her.
Mm-hmm. There's nothing to know. That's what we're gleaning. There's no there. She seems like the most boring dinner companion ever. Now I totally get why she had to rehearse her clever dinner conversation, because it doesn't come naturally. She probably doesn't read. She doesn't have a vast wealth of personal or professional experience to draw from. So, and she knows it. So what she's done instead is make it all about Trump. She's switched, as you point out, Hogan, from the joy to he's the devil incarnate. And that we're hearing more and more. We're seeing angry Kamala. Never again. Never. Never. He's going to unleash the military on the American people, which is a lie. That is not what Trump said at all. We've gone over it on this show time and time again. And here yesterday, she almost slipped in Wisconsin and had a deplorables moment, expanding it beyond just Trump is bad. Listen here.
The notion over the last several years coming from Trump and those who follow him, meaning people like who he's running with, not his voters, but just others. The notion that the measure of the strength of a leader is based on who you beat down is just wrong-headed.
All right. Yet again, a canned line she's used a million times, but you heard her there. She slipped. That's what she thinks of his supporters too. And then she corrected herself before she landed it.
Sure. And you've pointed out how many times she's been lying about Donald Trump. Her closing argument for the last couple of days was basically more debates and a doctor's note about his cholesterol. That obviously didn't go anywhere. But she lied on that debate stage about the bloodbath line, the debunked Charlottesville line. He wants to sign some crazy bill about banning abortion. That's not true. He wants to raise taxes. Obviously not true. So her consistency is the fact that she focuses her entire campaign on her opponent and refuses to tell people why she would be the better choice to improve their lives. And in large part, I believe that's because she's been in a seat of power for 4 years from which to do just that. As I mentioned, the things we face today with high prices for gas and groceries, she's the one who signed off and voted as a tie-breaking vote, so we would have to do that. She's the one who left the border wide open. So all the things we're facing and fighting against right now in our personal lives, it's because of her. So if she talks about her own record, she's got a serious problem. If she gets too close to Joe Biden, also a serious problem. And so for the people out there watching this, they're seeing a candidate that really offers them nothing except more of the same. And from the campaign standpoint, they've got the problem of, we should put her out more. Well, that means people are going to see that she's more radical than Joe Biden, sure, but she's way less likable as well. And so they have a lot of structural problems. This thing is very close. It still comes down to ground game, and I understand all that. But I'm telling you, I have seen this play out now for the last several months, and it's shocking to me that even with the media covering for her and carrying her water, that she's still not able to be leading in these swing states.
She needs to distance herself from Joe Biden, Doug, but that's risky because Joe Biden still has some ardent supporters on Team Blue, and he's still alive and sort of well. And he doesn't seem to much like her pretending she wasn't part of his administration. You know, we saw what he was doing when she tried to inject herself into the hurricane politics, countermanding her at every turn. You know, no, Ron DeSantis is doing a great job. He and I are talking at that cabinet meeting where he was like, hold on, I'm not done. So she's in a tricky spot because she needs to stiff arm him, but she can't upset him because he's still in a very powerful position.
That's absolutely right. What has startled me is when they say, how are you going to be different from Joe Biden? She's not pivoted to the economy and said, look, we had an approach, or he had an approach during the pandemic. Go through it and say, we're in different times. We need different policies. And here are my policies. That would have been forward-looking, allowed her to differentiate without attacking. But so far, I haven't heard anything like that other than the canned remarks, which increasingly are sounding, as I said before, inauthentic, but also antiseptic, if I can use that word.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, except for when she's like dabbling with the deplorable stuff, Hogan, which is new. You heard that soundbite I just played. She got close again. I mean, this is the same person who, you know, we played it, part of it. Every day there's a new version of it. I really believe that a leader is somebody who inspires people to lift other people up, not put other people down. And that's what she wants us to believe she does. But listen to her here getting close to a deplorables moment again in SOT, I think is it 8, SOT 8?
I have seen a lot of Republicans go up to Liz Cheney and thank her. Yeah. And they may not be doing it publicly. Because I think she has shown, to your point, extraordinary courage, especially in this environment post-January 6th, where there's an undercurrent that is violent in terms of the language and the tenor. And for her to show the courage she has shown is extraordinary.
There's an undercurrent of violence against Democrats, Hogan, not against Trump.
Right.
No.
Who's
only one person took a bullet, twice. But okay.
Sure. This is, again, part of the inherent problem she has as a candidate. She's just bad at this. We all know. But this is another way she's like Joe Biden. Joe Biden stood there with that red backdrop all angry and basically said half of the country are racists and fascists and Hitlerian. I mean, The Atlantic just had a piece last week where it compared Donald Trump to Hitler, Mussolini, and Stalin all rolled into one. I mean, the rhetoric of their side has been ratcheted up now for a decade against Donald Trump. And she's flirting with disaster here by basically saying everybody in this country who disagrees with me is dumb. They've been saying it in some form or fashion because they pointed out, oh, no, you think the economy's bad, that you're paying more for gas and groceries? No, you're just stupid. It's really better. I promise you that.
You're welcome.
So their disdain for the worker, their disdain for people who disagree with them is so overwhelmingly obvious at this point. It makes people kind of get their back up and go, wait a minute, who are you to tell me what I'm feeling here at home when I know how I'm suffering and I know who caused it, and that's you.
Let me squeeze this in. All around my town in Connecticut, I see Harris Wald's signs. Sure. I think obviously Connecticut is going blue, but these are the ones that I object to. Harris Walls, obviously. That's the sign.
Oh, gosh.
Harris Walls, obviously. Yeah. To the exact point you make, which is like, it really makes you want to flip the bird at the sign, and it makes you absolutely certain that you will get out there and vote, which, by the way, I did this week, and I voted for Trump. And that vote is in the mail and being banked right now. So I am flipping the bird to their stupid signs. And it plays perfectly into that elitist, like, only you losers would even consider voting Trump.
Trump can't go out there and make a joke about Arnold Palmer in Arnold Palmer's hometown, a hero and a golf legend. But I guess the only penises that the left and Democrats and the media are comfortable talking about are the ones that they want to chop off of young underage boys.
Oh, boy.
Like their disdain for anybody who disagrees with their woke radical ideology is so offensive to so many Americans because we're talking about right and wrong. We're talking about common sense versus sanity. And she is a microcosm of where this party, the Democrats, have moved now for the last several years. And I think the American people are rejecting it.
Obviously. All right, Hogan and Doug, stay with me. Quick break, and we'll get back to those polls. This year, supply chain issues have been more prevalent than ever. Whether it's the result of natural disasters like Hurricanes Helene and Milton, global conflict, or inflation, the impacts are being felt everywhere. While they sometimes are minor in their inconvenience, delays in accessing essential medications can become catastrophic. The U.S. relies on overseas sources for more than 80% of its generic medications. Did you know that? So what happens when there are delays or if supplies are cut off? How will you care for yourself and your loved ones? The Jace case offers peace of mind for you and your family in the face of delays, shortages, and disasters. It's an emergency medication kit containing 5 life-saving antibiotics that treat the most common and deadly bacterial infections. Simply complete a quick online evaluation to ensure that you are prepared. The Jace case can also be customized with add-ons like ivermectin, EpiPens, and more. Don't wait. Consider preparing right now. Receive a discount on your Jace case by visiting jace.com, JASE.com, and enter the promo code MK at checkout. That's promo code MK at JASE.com, ensuring you have the right medications exactly when you need them. Coming up later, an exclusive interview with an author who grew up in communist China who says Kamala Harris's policies remind her of her childhood. And she's got a real comparison to make. She'll do it here. Back with me first, Hogan Gidley, former Trump National Press Secretary, and Doug Schoen, a Democratic consultant, pollster, and strategist. Before we leave Kamala Harris's media tour and what happened yesterday, I did want to show this one soundbite where, it just shows you it's all AstroTurf. I've told this audience before, when you are a network, you conduct a town hall. The anchor knows all the questions that are coming to the candidate. They have to be pre-screened because you don't want every question to be about abortion or, the economy. You want to mix it up. But this is something different. And it's Maria Shriver out there in what's supposed to be, I think, more of a loose, freewheeling chance for the candidate to meet voters. And listen to this admission in SOT 15.
You're not, unfortunately. We have some predetermined questions, and hopefully I'll be able to ask some of the questions that might be in your head. I hope so.
So they would not allow anybody at this town hall, which is not a network thing. And she was like, it's like a YouTube thing. This was not, she wouldn't let anybody just fire a question. Contrast that with Trump's rallies. Or who I'm thinking of right now, Hogan, is Vivek. Like these Republicans who are used to getting their ideas battered by everybody who hears them, they're like, all comers, fine. Ask me whatever the heck you want.
Think about JD, all the questions he gets when he goes out there and stops and takes them. That's one reason I think he performs so well in the debate. We're used to this back and forth, these types of arguments. You've seen Speaker Johnson, for example, on some of the Sunday shows getting pummeled, and he gives it right back to him. These are the types of things Republicans have to do on a daily basis, is take difficult questions, because oftentimes we're the only ones really held to account. And what you saw in that was a really big admission, though. It reminded me of when Bernie Sanders was asked about Kamala Harris's alleged flip-flops on all these issues, the things she's deeply held close to her heart as her values for 25 years. She just jettisoned in 2 weeks after she got the nomination, yet no one believes that. But Bernie basically said, look, she's trying to get elected. So, you do what you got to do. It's the same thing here. It's an admission of, hey, look, these are all pre-screened. Don't worry about it. This whole thing is manufactured. It's just another thing that we all know is happening, but that someone says out loud and in the open. And you're like, wait a minute, I've been lied to this entire time. And the answer is absolutely yes.
Everything here is fake, madam. No, we won't be taking any real questions. All right, Doug, let's move on to polling. I mentioned at the top of the show, This guy, John Ralston, who you'll be able to tell our audience about, has covered Nevada for 3 decades. He runs the Nevada Independent. And big cautionary note before we get into this. Early voting is early voting. It's not day of voting, and it could change. We've got 2 weeks to go for early vote to pour in. And while today may be a very good day for Republicans, by 2 days from now, it could have entirely switched the other way. So do with that information what you will, audience members. You understand it has a big asterisk next to it. But what he is saying, is reported, reading here from The Hill, is he said in a post on Monday that through 3 days of early voting and counting of mail-in ballots, more Republicans had submitted ballots than Democrats for the first time in a presidential election year since at least 2008. That Republicans led in counted ballots by about 6,000, roughly 2%, meaning they've got 6,000 more votes than the Democrats do out of what he says is a 250,000 votes cast so far. So that's a lot of early voting. He predicted it's probably not far from a fifth of the total vote expected in Nevada. And Republicans have a 6,000 ballot advantage so far. Or so, look, could those all be never Trump Republicans? They could. Is it likely? No. And just filling out the reporting, Ralston explained that the firewall that generally contributes to a Democratic advantage from Clark County has, quote, collapsed, with Democrats only leading Republicans there by about 4,500 votes. That county is the most populous in the state. It's home to Las Vegas. And he said the Democrats, and then the paper's pointing out that the Democrats' lead in Clark County did grow Monday to Tuesday up to 6,500 from 4,500. So it got a little better. Ralston said the rural areas are also outperforming what should be their share of the electorate by almost 4 points. Quote, the large mail ballot lead enjoyed by Dems has been erased and more by the GOP lead in in-person early voting. And he said, look, while anything could happen, things change. He described Monday as, quote, a huge day for Republicans in Nevada, and said a few more days like this and the Democrat bedwetting will reach epic proportions. So what do you make of that John Ralston report?
Well, I know John Ralston. I've known him 30, 35 years. He is a man of integrity. He is not a partisan either way. And I have felt that because Nevada is a state that has a relatively high proportion of non-college educated people, both white and non-white, largely Hispanic, that I thought this was more fertile ground for Trump than the early analysis and some of the polls have suggested. But with what Ralston is saying, as you read it out, gives me confidence that at the very least, Nevada will be very, very close. And if there's any advantage that I would glean from what he said, it would be, as he suggested, an advantage for Donald Trump. And again, in a state, many of the commentators so far have put in Kamala's category.
Yeah, they've been saying that that's the most likely to go blue, Hogan. And yet those are good. That's good initial feedback, at least for Trump.
Sure. And look, initially, too, it's the culinary union that kind of controls the vote there. And that's why Democrats end up kind of winning Nevada and have for the last several cycles. But I think Doug's right. What I would caution listeners, viewers, too, are a couple things. I'm so glad now Republicans are embracing the early vote. That should be something they do. But where I'm kind of watching and paying attention to is it's not so much the date you vote, but the number of voters. Meaning, if 100,000 people would typically turn out on Election Day, and you got them all to vote 2 weeks early, that's great. But if you need 200,000 voters, the question is, have you done enough on the ground to identify, persuade, register, mobilize those voters needed to actually win the state?
Well, wait, but Hogan, doesn't it I'll let you finish your point, but doesn't it help the Republicans to have these early votes come in, because then the canvassers can check all of those people. They know who voted. They don't know how they voted, but they know who voted, and they no longer have to keep bothering those people.
Yes, that's the beauty of it. So I love the fact they are early voting. As I said, that's important. You're seeing that big numbers in Pennsylvania and Georgia, North Carolina, et cetera. This is a really good sign and a really good start for Republicans, but they have to finish the drill. You got to run through the tape. That's all I'm saying. And so the ones where they have, if they have 500,000 voters identified and they know 100,000 already voted, great. Then quit sending those 100,000 the text messages. Quit going and knocking on their doors and showing them up at work. Go find the ones now that you know you can get to the polls on your behalf. I think Donald Trump's campaign has just done an outstanding job recognizing the problem, addressing the problems from 2020, and then doing things differently. He's outsourcing a lot of that this time to third-party groups. It's something that's kind of never been tried on the scale. But again, norms don't really exist in Trump world. But if this is pulled off the way I think it's actually going, what an incredible model and what a revolutionary way to play this hand-to-hand combat in politics.
I mean, people like Elon Musk, people like Charlie Kirk, people like Scott Pressler in Pennsylvania, who we interviewed, who's doing the Get Out the Vote for Trump there. They will need personal thank yous from Donald Trump.
Yeah.
If Donald Trump wins this election, he got himself elected. But boy, oh boy, those will be three names he's going to need to help for the Get Out the Vote effort, which, as much as people love you, it doesn't matter unless they actually pull the lever for you, or in today's day and age, fill in the little dot on the Scantron. Doug, can you please answer a question for me as somebody who actually is a pollster? We all know the polls were flawed in 2016. Then came 2020, where once again, they greatly overstated what Joe Biden's support was going to be. And I've heard people say they had fixed the underpolling of Trump people in 2020, and I'm wrong. If you look at the day before the election, they had corrected all these overstatements. So the polls in 2020 were in fact fixed. They were good, fixed in a good way. And I've also heard people say, no, they still hadn't figured it out by 2020, but they figured it out closer to 2022. And they definitely have figured out how to get the Trump voters factored into the polls today. So, and if anything, they may have overcorrected to where now they have more rural voters in there, more working class voters. And even the Trump first-time voters who he got off of the couch for the first time in 2016, that they're now baked into the cake. They're easier to poll. So you can trust the polls in this cycle better than you ever could. What's the truth?
The truth is we don't know. And if you ask me, no, but if you ask me to answer the question, because we really don't know how to draw samples. We don't know what percent are online, what percent are on cell phones, what small percent are on landlines. We don't know. So I say we don't know, not to duck the question, but there were two different types of elections. Presidential, where Donald Trump is on the ballot, in 2022, which was a midterm election where Donald Trump was not on the ballot. From everything I've seen and I've done, the problem hasn't been fixed. I suspect there will be an underpolling of the Trump voter if I had to bet, because a certain percentage of Trump voters are both harder to reach and disinclined to tell anyone that they're voting for the former president. Now, we don't know because there's no fixed formula or clear answer. But if you ask me to say, who do I think's ahead now? I think Donald Trump's ahead. I think he's more likely than not to win. And many, Megyn, of my more rational Democratic friends feel the same way, though they don't want to be perhaps as blunt about it as I've just tried to be.
Mm. Yeah, you heard Maria Shriver last night saying that everyone she knows is completely freaked out about the election, taking gummies. They're resorting to drugs now to get through the next couple of weeks. Before I go back to Hogan, can I read something to you, Doug Schoen? This is the Real Clear Politics average of polls. And, they post this day in history every day. And it's very helpful. So they looked back at 16, 20, and then they give you the numbers today in 24.
Right.
Okay. On the national level, this is as of yesterday, in 16, they were showing Clinton up 6.2, 2020, Biden up 7.5. Now they have Harris up 1.0. By the way, in 2020, Biden did not win 7.5. He won 4.4. So they overstated the polls, Biden's support. Now keep going with me. In 16, they had Clinton in Wisconsin up 6.5. They had Biden up 4.6. He would ultimately win Wisconsin by 0.6. So they overstated his support by 4 points. Today they have Trump up 0.2. Pennsylvania, they had Hillary Clinton up 6.2. They had Biden up 4.9. Biden would win the state 1.8. So they overstated him by about 3 points. Today they have Trump up 0.8. Ohio, that's not really, no longer really a swing state. Let's jump ahead to Michigan. Clinton was up 12 at this point in 16. Biden up 7.8. Joe Biden won it 2.8. So they overstated his support in Michigan by 5 points. Today they have Trump up 1.2. Arizona, Clinton up 1.5 at this point in 16. Biden up 3.2. Joe Biden would win Arizona by 0.4. So again, overstated his support by about 2.8. Trump right now showing up 1.6. Nevada showed Clinton up 4.7. Showed Biden up 5.2 at this point. He won the state by 2.4. So overstated him by about 3 points. Trump right now leading 0.8. North Carolina, Clinton up 2.8. Biden up 2.3. Biden would win it 1.3. Trump right now up 0.5. This is the Real Clear Politics of average of all polls there. Georgia was showing Trump up in 2016, 4 points. In 2020 was showing Biden up 0.8. Biden would win Georgia by 11,000 votes, which was 0.3. And right now they're showing Trump up 1.8. My God. I've never seen this. I go to Real Clear every day, Doug. Trump, up in every single one of the averages in every single swing state. That's unprecedented. What does it tell us?
Here's what it tells us. If you assume that in the swing states from the two prior elections, the Trump vote is understated by, say, 3 points, which was on the low side of most of the states you cited, that would give him in every swing state a comfortable victory. I don't think there's any one of those swing states that would make Harris the leader, if in fact there is the factor that I believe still exists. And I think that's one of the reasons the Democrats remain worried. But also something else, Megyn, all the trend data has been moving both nationally and in the swing states to Trump. It's been small movements, yes, but almost no movement to the vice president. So when you look at the trends, you look at the past vote, and you look at how the polls are now coming in, you have a tough time reaching any conclusion other than Donald Trump is a narrow but clear favorite to win the election.
Hogan, what do you make of those? I mean, I've never seen that. Trump in the Real Clear Politics average, all the swing states.
I mean, razor thin, you hit on it. In 2016, he was, I think, at like 43 around this time, finished at 47. In 2020, he was at 4.3 and finished around 47. Right now, he's way ahead of where he was at any of those two previous elections at the same time. I'd much rather be in this position, having been the press secretary for the campaign in 2020, than where we were 4 years ago. But it's pretty obvious now that I think some of this race is settling down, where the media can't really tell you too much more about Donald Trump. They can't really tell you too much more about Kamala Harris. These candidates are standing now on their own records, their own rhetoric. And it's pretty clear at this point, Doug is correct. The American people are taking a look and going, wait a minute. You're telling me I could afford gas and groceries 4 years ago. There weren't wars breaking out all over the world. I don't have illegal aliens flooding into my community, committing, murder and rape and burglaries and assaults, all of those things. and now I do. The choice, even though I may be still uncomfortable with some of the things Trump says, I still remember that time more fondly. And if Trump really does have some of those significant numbers and made up massive ground with Black men and Hispanics, then I think this is going to be an incredible night for Donald Trump and the campaign.
All right, so here's something else I'm seeing that suggests she's losing, that it's not going well for her, Doug. Anything could happen. We got 2 weeks to go. People could change their minds. Yeah. There could still be an October surprise. No one should get complacent. Morning Joe is in the midst of a meltdown, and they're mad at Team Harris. And it's over an issue that's hurting her, Doug, and it's one of my most important issues, and that is the whole trans insanity that we've unleashed on our little boys and girls. And Trump has been dropping all this money on these ads that are playing in the NFL games about how Kamala Harris, and she did in 2019, made clear in an ACLU questionnaire that she wanted to change the law to make it mandatory that taxpayers pay for the sex change operations and other procedures for prisoners and illegal aliens. This is true. It is an absolute fact. And on top of that, Kamala Harris has bragged about it on camera. And we've shown the audience the soundbite. The New York Times, the day of the Bret Baier interview, dropped a piece by Glenn Thrush trying to say he did it too. Trump did it too. And Morning Joe is happy about the New York Times piece and sees these two things as totally equivalent. I'm just going to tell the audience, just to remind those who didn't see our extra episode last week, which got into this, just a quick explainer on what Trump actually did. Trump did not advocate to change anything to help people get sex change operations in prison on the taxpayer dime. Trump inherited Obama's policy mandating that and immediately set to work to get around it. It was immersed in legal challenges for all 4 years of Trump's presidency, which then became mandated when they lost a court decision. And after Trump left office, somebody got a sex change operation in prison under Joe Biden, thanks to this court proceeding. And Joe Biden restored the Obama policy in full. He loved the Obama policy. Trump wasn't in favor of this. Trump didn't like it. He actually did manage to change the policy somewhat, and he fought it legally, and he certainly never is on camera bragging that he would work to change the law, as Kamala Harris is, to make sure everyone can get it if they're in prison or an illegal. Those are the facts. I wouldn't give Trump a pass on this, and trust me, this is a big issue for me. I have every belief that if Trump gets back into the Oval, he will make sure this stops. I mean, he can't now look at his base and all those NFL watchers and say, oh, gee, I'll allow it to keep going. But take a look at Morning Joe on this whole kerfuffle today.
Donald Trump's Justice Department, Donald Trump's, the head of his Bureau of Prisons, was sending instructions to Congress about gender-affirming care and possibly surgery. And for the life of me, I don't understand how the Harris campaign allows 30,000 commercials to run on NFL games. Yes, some people on the campaign scratching their heads going, this isn't a real issue. And then they're going, why are we losing black men and Hispanic men and working class white men?
This is Donald Trump's
Justice Department
transgender offender manual
and
guidance,
taxpayer funded
on transgender surgeries, gender affirming care in Donald Trump's prisons when he was president.
Hypocrites.
Just responding to that soundbite they keep running of Kamala Harris talking about that happening in prisons and being the law. Trump's policy.
He tries to grab it. She won't let him. Yeah. She grabs it back. So, Doug, you tell me what's happening there and whether you're hearing within the Democrat circles whether people are starting to turn on Team Harris.
What I am getting is extreme unease with the whole range of social issues surrounding Kamala Harris. And what I found in politics, and I suspect Megyn, you and Hogan similarly, is when people don't want to deal with an issue or are having trouble processing it. They just get themselves into a kerfuffle, to use your word. And that's the sense I have with the Democrats. They don't have a clear response other than to try to blame Trump for that which they are clearly much more, indeed singularly responsible for. It's, again, another issue that is playing into his hands without a credible Democratic response.
Megyn,
go ahead, Hogan.
The Democrats almost benefit by their policies being so radical because so few people actually believe someone could hold that policy. Remember how this even became an issue? Was that on CNN, someone brought this position Kamala Harris had of taxpayer-funded sex change operations for illegal aliens in prison, and the anchor was like, no, that's not real. And they were like, no, it is. Here's the questionnaire. Here's her bragging about it. Now we have the video of it. But also there's an undercurrent here, too, that I think we need to be well aware of that may not boil over, I guess, before the election, but definitely after, if they lose. And it's this. The Kamala Harris team hates the Joe Biden team, hates the Barack Obama team, hates the Biden team, hates the Harris team. They all don't like each other. So if this thing begins to erode or implode in any fashion between now and the next 2 weeks, I think more of this palace intrigue story is going to be a bigger kind of focus of the mainstream media, because so many people in these orbits like to start to point fingers if they feel like it's not going the right way. So you can talk about Trump and how he's being successful right now and how it looks like the thing's on the right track because it is, the trajectory is good, but it's also kind of beneficial to take a look at what your opponent is doing. They don't have a good closing message, and what you're seeing a lot of is backbiting on their side and finger pointing on people to blame for their failures.
It is amazing to see the consternation as they realize this issue, which is near and dear to my own heart, is a bad one for them. And it's heartening to see them run from it because now they can never embrace it again. Now they can't. Now everybody's going to start losing House seats and Senate seats the more they cozy up with this crazy ideology where they're abusing children, abusing women in prisons, and allowing this stuff. Like, whatever happens in this election, we're winning on this issue, and we must win because this one involves abusive women, abusive children. Doug Schoen, thank you so much for being here. Hogan, great to see you
Megyn.
too.
Thank you.
To be continued, guys.
Thank you, Megyn.
Wow.
Thanks
What
much.
a day. Okay, coming up next, an exclusive interview with an author who says her life growing up in communist China reminds her of Kamala Harris's policies and what the Democrats have been doing to us since George Floyd in particular. She's actually going out on the campaign trail with Trump tomorrow. She'll be here first today. If you are tired of the same old coffee from the big mega corporations pushing their woke agendas, listen up. It's time to take a stand and support a brand that truly embodies American values. Blackout Coffee. They stand with hardworking Americans who believe in family, faith, and freedom. They roast some of the most incredible coffee you will ever taste using only premium grade beans, roasted and shipped to you within 48 hours. And for the cold brew fans, Blackout Coffee is excited to announce the launch of their 2 new ready-to-drink cold brew coffee latte options. Don't settle for less. Make the switch to Blackout Coffee. Head on over to blackoutcoffee.com/MK or use the code MK for 20% off your first order. Blackoutcoffee.com/MK. The code is MK. Join the movement. Taste the difference. Remember, with every sip, you are supporting a brand that stands for America. Be awake, not woke. 4 years of crushing interest rates, runaway inflation, and reckless government spending. And who is paying the price? You. You might have bills stacking up, debt collectors on your back. You might be barely able to keep food on the table. Done with Debt can be a way out. They have developed new aggressive strategies designed to get you out of debt permanently without bankruptcy or loans. Done with Debt stands between you and your bill collectors. They can go head to head with these guys, getting your balances reduced, interest rates slashed, and penalties stopped. They create a plan to end your debt fast and put more cash in your pocket every month. And right now, Done with Debt is accepting new clients. But you do need to act fast. Some credit relief programs expire. Before you even make another payment, consider a visit to donewithdebt.com or call 1-888-322-1054 right now. 1-888-322-1054. Speak with one of their debt relief strategists for free by going to donewithdebt.com, donewithdebt.com. Now we turn to an exclusive interview with someone sounding the alarm about what she says will happen if Kamala Harris is elected this November, and how it reminds her of her time growing up in communist China. Xi Van Fleet was born in China and lived through Mao's Cultural Revolution. She's seeing things that are all too familiar to the regime she remembers. She's the author of Mao's America, A Survivor's Warning, which is out in paperback next week. Xi, welcome to the show. All right, so for those who don't understand or know anything about the Cultural Revolution, which I believe was from around 66 to 76, just walk us through what was happening in China at that time when you were a little girl.
Yes, but first of all, thank you so much to invite me to your show. I love your show. I watch it, listen to it every day.
Oh, thank you. Oh, so the pleasure's all ours.
Yeah. Yes, this is very, very important for Americans to know. This piece of history is so relevant to America today. What happened in China in 1966 is a cultural revolution that Mao launched. It is the revolution to unseat, take down the CCP, take down the government. And by who? By Mao. Mao wanted to take it down because he felt like he was losing control. He was losing control of his own party and the government. He is losing control of the absolute power. So he launched the revolution to really get the power back. That is the real story. But by who and how? This time, he did not use the military. This time, he used the kids, the indoctrinated youth from elementary school all the way up to universities. They are the Red Guards. And he used them to take down the people that he felt like was no longer loyal to him. That's pretty much the whole bureaucracy of the CCP. And they also want to destroy the entire Chinese civilization and what he called the four olds: old culture, old ideas, old habits, and old custom. That is everything that in the past, destroy the past. Just like Kamala said, imagine what can be unburdened by what has been. So they destroyed the statues, they renamed streets and roads and institutions, and including their own names to be politically correct. They burned books, and they eventually turned on to the perceived enemies, and started with their teachers and the principals.
And the language control, as I understand it, was important.
Absolutely.
To getting control over the society.
Absolutely. And it's not just language control, it's thought control. Growing up in China, and I was so thoroughly indoctrinated, I could not think any other way. I had no idea there's such a thing as critical thinking. I just get fed with the propaganda and I just follow the orders. And that is really what I see here in America.
So how did your life start to change once, this period dawned on China while you're in the midst of this? Were you policed in your language when you went to school? Like what was changing in your life under this time?
During the Cultural Revolution, I just followed the order. And actually, I was only 7 when the Cultural Revolution started, and the school stopped and closed because there's no one running the school, because the kids ousted all the principals and the school administrators. So I had no school for 2 years. In some areas, it lasted as long as 4 years. So there's absolutely, we're just free to go out and watch the whole Cultural Revolution unfolding. And I saw struggle sessions. I saw the Red Guards not only taking down statues in public spaces, they went to people's homes and took out all those four olds hidden in people's homes and destroyed them. And I saw the teachers being attacked, principal being attacked. It was really a world turned upside down. The
Red Guards killed people, including
they killed
children. Yeah. And so what would lead to a Red Guard death sentence?
Okay, so the Red Guards were the ones that Mao used to launch the revolution, and it lasted about up to 3 years. By then, all the people in power was taken down by them. Everything was destroyed. And then they become a problem. And what do you think that Mao would do to them? Instead of giving them a seat at the table, he expelled them to the countryside for hard labor, for the so-called re-education. And since then, all the young people from cities were sent to the countryside. When I graduated from high school at the age of 16, me too, was sent to the countryside to work in the field to get my so-called re-education that lasted for 3 years until Mao's death. And his successor, Deng Xiaoping, finally decided to stop all this chaos and reopen university. And at the age of 19, I was able to go to college. And in 1986, I was able to come to America for my graduate study.
Wow. And that was the beginning of everything for you. Now you're an American citizen. And I understand you just cast your vote in this election.
Yes, I just did. To me, it was such a moment. I really was, shaking hand, and my hands were shaking. And I just feel like this election really, really will determine the survival of our republic. People here, especially young people, they have no idea. They never lived the day without freedom. They have no idea what it is like to lose freedom. So not just lose your the right to speak, they will indoctrinate everyone so no one could even think freely. And that is the kind of slavery of communism that so few Americans really understand.
Mm-hmm. This is why you voted for Donald Trump. You're going to be campaigning with Donald Trump tomorrow in Georgia. Yes. And you've been living by these principles for a long, long time. You spoke up loudly, forcefully in Loudoun County, Virginia, which has been ground zero for a lot of these fights. Right after the death of George Floyd, when we all, not we, but many people in the country were losing their minds and allowing this so-called critical race theory to infect everything. Unfortunately, it's still everywhere and it needs to be extracted like a cancer. But you spoke up at one of the school board meetings. We have a little bit of that. This thing made you a star. Let's watch.
Growing up in Mao's China, all this seemed very familiar. The communist regime used the same critical theory to divide people. The only difference is they use class instead of race. During the Cultural Revolution, I witnessed students and teachers turn against each other. We changed school names to be politically correct. We were taught to denounce our heritage. The Red Guards destroy anything that is not communist, old statues, books, and anything else. We are also encouraged to report on each other, just like the Student Equity Ambassador Program and the bias reporting system. This is indeed the American version of the Chinese Cultural Revolution. The critical race theory has its roots in cultural Marxism. It should have no place in our schools.
Amazing. And that, I mean, you've been there. And it's actually, if you speak to people from certain Eastern European countries, they have exactly the same view you do. When you've had all these rights restricted or really removed from your life, in your case as a little girl, without even knowing what it would be like to have them, you see this indoctrination very differently, critical race theory among them.
Absolutely. I think it is simply because I've been there, I lived through it, and I can see it. And the reason that the American people, so many of them, even today, they don't recognize it. Why? It's because they don't know. They don't know the history. They were never taught the history of communism and the history of Chinese communism and the history of the Chinese Cultural Revolution. And that's why they could not recognize. And that is by design. And that's why they took our universities and then our schools, because by controlling the educational system, they could really get rid of the past, get rid of the inconvenient history and indoctrinate the kids. And that's not just today. It started way back.
Right. Like the fact that America's one of the only countries to ever fight a war to end slavery, as opposed to our original sin of having it, which they want to say we can never get out of. They just want to erase the parts of history that would show who we truly are. This, something you said in the beginning of the interview reminded me of this. James Lindsay went on with Tucker recently, and he was making a point that you just, I think, alluded to. He was with Charlie Kirk. And here's the point. Take a listen.
Vice President Harris will say repeatedly, what is the quote? The quote is that we can see what can be unburdened by what has been. Is that word salad or Marxism? It's Marxism. That is, in fact, not at all word salad. It is a Marxist, as I said on Twitter the other day and got mocked relentlessly by the media for this. I said it's a Marxist incantation, as a matter of fact. It's like a spell. So you can see the possibility of a world that's unburdened from its own history, which is exactly what Mao Zedong did when he launched the campaign of Smash the Four Olds, the four old characteristics of Chinese society. They were going to make a new China that was going to be unburdened by what had been in the past of China. This is what the Soviets, the Bolsheviks, did when they took over power in Russia, is that they were going to make the new Russia. They're going to make the new man, as a matter of fact. People could become unburdened by what has been.
That, of course, is one of Kamala Harris's favorite phrases. Do you hear that kind of language from her in a different way than the rest of us do?
It took me a while. I said, what did she mean? It sounds kind of like a gibberish. I have no idea. It took me a while, and especially after listening to James Lindsay, I said, yes, that's exactly what I witnessed in China. Get rid of the four O's. Four O's stands for the past, stands for Chinese civilization, stands for a nation's memory, and has to be all erased because Mao wants to usher in his own ideology, his own religion, Maoism. And because of that, he has to get rid of everything in the past.
So what have you seen specifically with critical race theory, or I think you could probably say the same thing with the trans indoctrination, that looks familiar to you from the way you grew up? You said some division. Division. Why is that in their interest? Why do they want division?
Okay, so if you want to control a people, if you want to have a revolution, you got to divide the people. From day one in 1949, when the communists took over China, they divided the entire country into two classes, a red class and a black class. And the red one is those who own anything. You own land, property, or sometimes you just own one more walk than your neighbor. And you become the black class, the enemy of the people. And then the other side is the red class. Those are the proletarians. Those are the allies of the revolution. But eventually it becomes anyone who think like the rich and will be condemned and thrown into the black class. Just like today, being white, you are guilty. That is the original sin. Instead of the wealth, whiteness is the sin in today's cultural revolution here. And even if you are black, but if you're accused of thinking like a white person, you belong to the black class in Mao's term. And that is how every Chinese got an identity. This identity is something you pass down to your children and your children's children. And you can be born belonging to the black class just because your parents were. And with that, you become the second-class citizen. Mao used the identity politics to divide people and control people and set them against each other. And this is exactly what the critical race theory aims to do. Instead of class, they use race. That's just that simple. Very similar.
I was surprised after George Floyd at how quickly so many people and institutions folded on changing the curriculum, changing the narrative about America, changing everything, just posting the black square, saying Black Lives Matter, I'm going to say it. we got letters from both of our schools. The head of the school, I'm racist, and the school's racist, and I've done racist things. And I remember being like, what'd you do? What? Tell us. There was nothing. She was just self-flagellating to try to go along with, the messaging from above. I'm a good girl. Don't hate me. I want to be in one of the protected classes. Were you surprised how quickly people folded on this?
I was surprised, and I was not surprised. And because I've seen this before, what surprised me is that the Americans were for it. Back then, I really did not know. I did not pay that much attention. I told you, I told everyone that when I came to America, I thought I left communism behind me. I really thought there's nothing for me to worry about. And I, even as myself, I made this mistake. I did not share my stories of the Cultural Revolution with my friends, my family. I just want to forget about it. And so now in 2020, I realized that people just don't know. They don't know. And that is why actually in 2022, I finally decided that a short interview here and a speech over there won't do it. I quit my job and wrote that book. And that book really explained the parallels of these two cultural revolutions and tell everyone this is history repeating.
It's called Mao's America, A Survivor's Warning by Xi Van Fleet. You can get it in paperback right now. So Xi, what do you hear or see from Kamala Harris that concerns you?
Everything. And remember that equity clip she did. And, we started, we may not start in the same place. So that is the government job to make sure we all end up in the same place. Yes, Mao played that same trick, and we all ended up in the same place. That's true. Only that it's the same place of poverty, misery, and oppression. And then, everything she talked about, the race, critical race theory of the division, of the marginalized people, and then control price and everything else. She really thinks, talks, acts like a communist.
She has been saying go ahead, sorry.
I know dear to your heart is the transgender issue. And people ask me, did the Mao do transgender in China? No, he didn't. He did not have to. He did not have to because he had enough in tactics to achieve his goal. But he did attack gender role. And so growing up in China, the girls were all taught that femininity is toxic. It is weak. It is bourgeois. It is not revolutionary. It is something to get rid of. We all aim to be an iron girl. And iron girl is what men can do, we can do better. So all men and women and young girls, we think, talk, act, and dress like men. And we become kind of like men. And that is what Mao did to China. And here, of course, Mao was dealing with a people that never knew freedom and never always lived under tyranny. In America, this is the free people. And so they have to be more sophisticated. And what they're doing in America, I have to say, and it's more evil than what Mao did. Only that Mao killed more people. But this idea of you can transition from one gender to another just by identify yourself, that is absolutely evil.
Well, it's also very destabilizing for the family unit, for the community, for the school. And that seems to be of some benefit to a Mao type thinker. Like they're in favor of that sort of instability in the community.
Yeah, he did it in different ways. And one of these, he made all the children the spies of their parents. And the parents are really scared of children. And people ask me whether my parents talked to me during the Cultural Revolution, helped me to understand what's going on. I said, no, they're afraid of children because children will report their parents, and many of them were sent to execution site because the children reported their talks at home to the party.
Same thing in Cuba, by the way. We've had people on this show talking about how the same thing. They encourage you to report on your neighbor, report on your parents. You see these things bit by bit, schools asking you inappropriate questions about your home life, your child, doctors asking questions about your home life that are none of their business. You're sounding an important alarm, Xi. Thank you. Thank you for writing this book, Mao's America, A Survivor's Warning. I'm so glad you voted and that you're an American citizen, and have so much fun with Trump on the campaign trail tomorrow. Enjoy.
I will. Thank you so much.
Oh, all the best to you. Wow, what a story. God, you know, it's one of those things, a republic, if you can keep it. You know, freedom's too easy to lose. Only takes a generation, as they say. And we're well on our way to kissing it goodbye. Just without even stopping. Just what, over abortion? Is that worth it? That's going to be a state-by-state issue. It's not going to be outlawed in the United States of America. It's not. Think about what she said and what the future could look like if we go in the wrong direction. We'll see you tomorrow with Mark Halperin and the host of The Morning Meeting. Talk to you then.